The Elgin Parthenon marbles.
The Elgin marbles.
Parthenon marbles.
The Elgin marbles.
Parthenon marbles, yeah.
The Elgin marbles.
Parthenon!
The Elgin marbles, yes.
The Parthenon marbles.
The sculptures from the Parthenon, which are now on display in the British Museum, are sometimes referred to as the Elgin marbles because of the historical background, because of the way that they were brought to England by Lord Elgin. That is a term which conveys something about the history of what has happened to them. It is part of the story of their reception. Obviously, the reason that they are important, what is their significance for humanity, is nothing to do with the intervention of Lord Elgin, which was just an accident of their complicated partial survival from antiquity to the present day. They are clearly part of the magnificent temple on the Acropolis in Athens, and for me as a classicist, they are of course the sculptures from the Parthenon. There is no other accurate way of describing them.
I would definitely opt for the first version, Parthenon marbles, because it gives you a much more positive view of things, and it refers to the building where they came from, whereas calling them Elgin marbles always refers to the circumstances of transfer from Athens to London, and this definitely doesn't help in the debate. I would say it's in itself, the word Elgin marbles implies some kind of fraud or of theft, and I think we should not use the word or this term just to avoid misunderstandings. We should try to talk about the Parthenon marbles and see things in a very optimistic way.
Elgin marbles denotes this kind of British cultural imperialism, i.e. they were stolen from Greece at a time where obviously Greece as a state did not even exist. It was the Ottoman Empire at the time. However, they stress this kind of underdog culture of many Greeks, like them foreigners are stealing our cultural history, our past. I am against this kind of underdog culture. For these reasons, I would prefer to call them the Parthenon marbles.
"200 years ago, workmen were swarming over the Acropolis, the rock that dominates the ancient city of Athens. They were hard at work on exquisite pieces of marble sculpture, but this was not an act of creation. The workmen were obeying the orders of one man, Lord Elgin."
The Parthenon marbles and the whole question of transporting them from Athens to London was enmeshed in diplomacy between Britain and the Ottoman Empire. Lord Elgin made some kind of contractual arrangements to deal with the material he was expecting to find at the Acropolis site. But on the other side, we see that Sultan Selim II was quite explicit in mentioning that it was actually not the wish of the High Port, of the Sultan himself, to bring many objects to London. These were exceptions mentioned in the letter of the Sultan. So what Lord Elgin did ultimately, to remove most of the decoration from the Parthenon, was not exactly covered by contract law, I would say, even by the standards of early 19th century diplomacy. So this is probably the crucial foundation for the whole debate going on nowadays.
What is quite interesting here is that we have got reactions from Greeks themselves as well as from foreigners, including Lord Byron. So When Elgin removed the marbles, it was not without any protest.
Once a noble name, first of the mighty, foremost of the free, now honored less by all and least by me. Chief of thy foes shall Pallas still be found. Seek'st thou the cause of loathing? Look around. Lo, here, despite of war and wasting fire, I saw successive tyrannies expire. 'Scaped from the ravage of the Turk and Goth, thy country sends a spoiler worse than both.
It's important to say that during that period is a period of Greco-mania. There was a growing interest in everything Greek, particularly in terms of architecture. And you see the Greek revival and so on. And there was an advertisement in the Times in January 1814. A hairdresser announced a new lady's hairstyle inspired by the Parthenon figures. So you could see that this kind of Greco-mania is not an elite phenomenon, but it's widespread. So you need to see the wider context in order to understand why Elgin was collecting these antiquities.
Interestingly enough, the Ottoman Empire changed its attitude 60 years later quite significantly. When we see that German and French and British archaeologists came to Turkey, modern-day Turkey, and wanted to excavate there, they had to sign very strict contracts, and nothing was actually left for them to take apart from the consent of the Ottoman authorities. So there is no problem with huge monuments like the Pergamon altar in Berlin or other objects like the Heron of Trusa in the National Museum in Vienna, because there are waterproof contracts with the Sultan in this case. So obviously the Ottoman Empire learned from the first encounter with antiquarians, with European antiquarians. They learned from that and they changed their own cultural attitudes towards antiquities quite significantly. And probably this is one of the reasons why the Elgin marbles or the Parthenon marbles are still in the debate or in the discussion nowadays, because the modern state of Greece can definitely claim that they were acquired under unfavorable circumstances.
Whether or not Britain should give the Elgin marbles back to Greece, I think, is a very difficult question.
Maybe the UK should give the Elgin marbles back to Greece, or maybe not. I think there's an argument for both.
I think that most of the artifacts that were taken from the home country, whether it's Greece or Italy or Egypt, those should be returned to the home country. It's where they belong.
And yes, I definitely think the UK should give them back to Greece.
My opinion on the marbles is that they should definitely be returned to their home country, because not only for historical reasons, but to me, for political reasons. It came from Greece or from Italy or wherever, and it should be returned to the country that it came from, not be held somewhere else.
Yes, I do think UK should give them back to Greece. They're from Greece. I think they're yours, and they should be returned to the rightful owners, if that makes sense.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. It's part of the patrimony of this country. It's integral to the archaeology of this country. I think they should belong to the Greek nation, and that they should be seen by tourists as part of the site that they originated from.
The British should give them back, yes.
They should return them immediately. Also, Austria, Germany, France, the United States, they've stolen art from all of the Middle East, and they should return them immediately.
I would say we should separate the first instance of Lord Elgin bringing the Parthenon marbles from Athens to London. We should separate this issue from the modern day debate. And it has been long assumed that the conditions in the British Museum were perfect for the Parthenon marbles. This was already an argument brought forward by Lord Elgin when he removed the marbles from Athens, so that they could be better preserved in a modern European museum. But nowadays, after the building of the modern day Acropolis Museum, this is definitely not an argument anymore. But now it depends on what the two states, Greece and Britain, actually want to do and how they proceed in negotiating a possible transfer. So I think it's not up to archaeologists or to historians to make decisive statements or judgments here. It's up to politicians.
Politically speaking, the answer is quite different. If we focus just on the Elgin/Parthenon marbles, then the answer could be easy, yes. But then again, how about the other antiquities that are not in the British Museum? If we accept a universal rule, such as everything should return to where it belongs, then all museums of the world should return their antiquities to places that were originally built or made. This would arouse, though, a bit of a controversy and would cause some political and diplomatic issues between the countries affected.
I'm categorically opposed to the British or any other country coming to another country, taking their antiquities and keeping them. It's just not right.
I think the important thing is to preserve history as best as possible. So it's about wherever facilities are best equipped to keep things in the condition which most people can see them. Beyond that, I suppose I'm interested in seeing things within their context, although I suppose Greece now is so different to Greece then, it's almost a tenuous link between national treasures and current governments.
The reason I'd say give them back is because at this point, the British Museum could actually make a replica of the Elgin marbles. It would look exactly the same as the Elgin marbles, keep it here, and it would restore the marbles to Greece where they probably actually belong.
For me personally, it in a way doesn't matter very much whether they are in London or in Athens or somewhere else entirely, because I know that I wouldn't know the difference actually, without being taught how to use a microscope and how to study them, between the original and something that was a reproduction of the original.
In some senses, they feel that they've been in the UK for such a long time that it feels like, oh, they're so nice to be able to see. It's such an insight for us to be able to have these artifacts in the UK, because it gives you an insight into other cultures you might not necessarily otherwise be exposed to. However, they're Greek, so like, I do think, you know, we've had them long enough, like, and it was an act of theft, I think, initially, with the original antiquarians just going and saying, oh, that's interesting, I'll just take that back with me. So, yeah, I'd support them going back to Greece.
Oh, yes, they should come back to Greece. This is the home, and we have this beautiful museum now.
Well, I think they are in a safe place at the moment. Having in mind what is going on in Europe, in Greece and in other countries, probably, at the moment, British Museum have taken care for them for a long time. But I think when the situation is fine, probably they could go back at home.
I believe that we should give them back to Greece because they're part of Greek cultural heritage. They are only here, like many of the objects in the British Museum, because of Britain's imperial past, and basically we have to get over it.
If they go back to Greece, then they could be seen in a national context. The British Museum argues that if you put the marbles within the British Museum, you see them in a kind of wider global context. But again, the marbles will not return to the physical location, but they will go back to a museum. So sometimes it's a question really whether you appreciate more a set of sculptures when you see them as a whole, or you don't appreciate them as much when you see them fragmented. So that there are aesthetic arguments, there are arguments of ownership, there is also issues related to kinds of museums, national museums, global museums, and so on. So I think the Parthenon marbles triggered off a very interesting debate. And I think without this debate, then we would know very little about the marbles.
I don't feel very strongly about it. I saw them many times before I came to Greece, and that's why I came to Greece. Without seeing the Elgin marbles in London, I would never have visited Greece.
It would mean a lot to me as a tourist that I could visit them in their home country. Obviously, when you're in Greece, you want to see those marbles and something that's unique to the culture of Greece itself.
I wouldn't go to London in order to see the Elgin marbles. I would go to London in order to see London. It seems to me that historically the marbles belong here. And if this is the museum, then this is where they belong. But that's my opinion.
I have been to the Parthenon, and I had the opportunity to see the original place in where they were fit originally. And it would be very nice to see it in the museum close to in Athens.
I've never been to Athens, and the fact is I'm certain that wherever they ended up in Athens would not be as nice as the British Museum. But I think it would be great to see them in the context of Athens, and I'm sure that the Greek government would do something spectacular to house them.
As someone interested mainly in ancient architecture, it is absolutely clear that the Parthenon marbles, so the frieze of the cella of the Parthenon and also the metopes removed by Lord Elgin from Athens, belong together. So they are one ensemble of art, but they not only belong together as pieces of art, but they also belong into the context of the ancient building. So the ultimate thing would be to remove the Parthenon marbles from a museum, from any museum, be it the British Museum or the Acropolis Museum at Athens, and to bring them back to their original place where they belong, and this is the Parthenon itself. But this definitely has some crucial problems. There are major issues with conservation in this case. So you cannot actually, I would not propose to put them back onto the Parthenon just because of aspects like pollution and you know, all the problems of a modern day city like Athens. So in a way, for me as an archaeologist, the Parthenon marbles belong to the building, and this building stands in Athens. But on the other hand, from the point of a conservator or restorator, they definitely belong into a museum, and there they should be ideally appreciated as a whole in connection with the building where they come from.
If they were able to be shown or displayed as part of the whole, and there was a lot of information about the context, where they came from, maybe about even that they were taken by Lord Elgin and then maybe brought back to Greece. That would be really interesting, because it's not just an artifact that tells you about when it was built, where it originally came from, but they now have a political history as well. So I think it would be really great to see them in Greece, preserved as a whole. However, I think it's really important that they are preserved. So, I mean, not saying that Greece couldn't do that, but I think they're such an important artifact that it would be really nice if they could be shown wherever they're best going to be shown off.
Well, I'm not going to London to see them. I come here.
I think it would make sense for them to be displayed in their original setting, and originally they were high up on the Parthenon. That would clearly not be any use, you couldn't see them. But a museum at the Parthenon where you could see them as you can see them here, I think would be the best way of displaying them.
Well, I've just been up to the Parthenon and they're missing. I'm coming here in the museum to see the ones that are here, so it'd be useful to see them all in one place. I've been to London several times, but I've never once been to the British Museum to see them. So maybe I should, but it would be simpler for me as a traveller to be here in one place.
I think it'd be different seeing them in their natural habitat. It would add to the aesthetic of the whole thing. You know, seeing a red telephone booth in London makes it more exciting. So seeing those in Greece would make them more exciting, I think.
However, again, the decision and the reasons for whatever happens are not going to be taken on an aesthetic basis, but rather on a political and real basis. And whereas Greece is the winner, from this point of view, from any other point of view, Greece loses, not because of anything else, but because such is the current situation, and I'm afraid it cannot change.
There are articles in the international press suggesting that instead of Greece focusing on the marbles, it's better to deal with the financial problems and sorting out its finances.
Greece has had a very tough time over the last number of years. We all know about the recession that was over there. There's a lot of marbles that are inside the museum, and they should definitely be returned to Greece. Greece probably need them more now than ever before.
Obviously, the current situation of Greece has had an effect on the claim of Greece to the marbles.
There is an emphasis on, because of the crisis, many Greeks felt that Greece is a form of colony, and they used the term dead colony. So not only ordinary people, but even scholars have suggested that Greece has got a semi-colonial relationship with the West, and they use the term crypto-colonialism and so on. So the crisis exacerbated this kind of feelings that Greece has got this kind of received some sort of colonial treatment by the West. And perhaps the Parthenon sculptures is part of this debate.
I would say the question of cultural imperialism should not worry Greece at the moment, because Greece is definitely a strong nation state, an independent state, and is absolutely able to negotiate with any other partners and players in the world, the UK and other countries. And I think it has been quite clear that, for example, with the restitution of one piece of the Parthenon marbles from Heidelberg in the 2000s, that individual arrangements can be made between Greece as a sovereign nation state and other countries in the world. And I think why should this not occur also with the UK?
As a UK sort of citizen, I believe that they would be taken to their original place of birth, if you like. So to me, that would be a nice conclusion of the story, that they've gone back to where they belong.
Regardless of what is going on in Greece and Britain now, the marbles will stay where they are.